Hello, and welcome to the Visible Women Podcast. I'm Corinne Corbett, and along with co-host Kim DeBrew, we put issues related to diversity, inclusion, and appearance in the spotlight and examine how they impact the lives of women of color. So today, we're going to talk about living and working abroad. In college, you might think about studying abroad or teaching English for a year or two after we graduate, or become an au pair to strengthen our language skills. Or if you're in the military, you see the world because of where you're stationed. But after you've established your career, could you move to another country? I'm not talking about being transferred, but leaving your safety net and taking a leap and starting a new life elsewhere. That's what we're going to talk about today. There was an article a few years back where they cited an HSBC study called Expat Explorer, Balancing Life Abroad, where they talked to 20,000 people. Now, we know that those 20,000 people weren't all Black, but they mentioned some of the top places to live abroad were Singapore, New Zealand, Sweden, but then they talked about globally, expats said that cities of London, Dubai, Singapore, and Hong Kong are the four best places in the world to start a business due to their strong economies, culture, and business environments. And expats in the Middle East enjoy some of the most generous employment packages. More than half, 52% of expats globally have health and medical benefits, but only a third receive accommodation allowances compared to 60% of expats living in the Middle East.
Yeah, so what I noted about the article is that some of the factors that we typically associate with just an outstanding work environment or an outstanding professional experience were present in this study about expats. So they talked about improved quality of life. They talked about career satisfaction. They talked about childcare. Those are very typically associated with really sort of a positive experience. So the question that started to emerge for me was for Black and brown women who want to be affirmed by the workplace, want sort of a sense of balance, a sense of affirmation. Would the experience be the same? So that's the question that I've been in since I read that. And also thinking about those core values that communities of color really lean on very heavily. So a sense of community, a sense of respect and connection across generations, spirituality, centering around family. Like, how do those play out for folks that live abroad? So that's the question that I've been in since we thought about this topic. And I'm really thrilled that we're going to talk to a content expert. And maybe, who knows, maybe when my daughter gets to, very soon, right, 6 years, when she gets to a place where she has an opportunity to study abroad, maybe I'll be able to inform that decision a little bit more.
So I'm delighted, really delighted to welcome our guest today. Heather Shaw is a communications consultant with over 15 years of private and public sector experience as a lawyer, executive leadership strategist, and international corporate communications professional. A multi-skilled executive, Heather is a strategic thinker with global expertise in public and media relations, crisis and issues management, corporate social responsibility, and philanthropy. Currently, she's the Assistant Director of Tourism and Culture for the City of Miami Beach. Prior to that, she spent 8 years living and working in Dubai, holding positions such as Director of Corporate Communications for Expo 2020 Dubai, the first World Expo in the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia region, Senior Director of Corporate Communications for Hilton Worldwide, Middle East and Africa, Head of Communications for Barclays PLC, where she managed internal and external communications for Barclays Africa. And she was head of global public relations and corporate social responsibility for Limitless LLC, a Dubai World company. Prior to her moving, she served as the director at Time Warner Inc. And that's how I know Heather. We went from my Time Inc. days, Time Warner days. She has also, prior to that, worked in government community relations for the New York Botanical Gardens, counsel and chief of staff for the New York City deputy mayor for community development, and general counsel for the New York City Department of Business Services. So Heather has had an amazing career. And in the middle of this career, she decided to make this leap. So we're going to talk to her about the myths and realities of living and working abroad, and maybe be enlightened on what it's like to pick up and go. What kind of guts do you need to make that sort of change in your life? So welcome, Heather.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
So let's talk about first, what led you to make this move?
I think what started, and I can even go back to my childhood. I'm the youngest of all girls. My mother had sisters, one brother. I grew up with a house of women. I was really empowered to be able to do a lot of things that anything I wanted to do. I was always told I could do whatever I wanted to do. My mother's youngest sister was an expat. She worked for the State Department all of her life and traveled the world. And I watched my mother and her sisters go and visit her. So travel didn't seem like an odd thing to do, or that, to just up and go. My aunt did that. And I always felt in my family that I always had this net that if I did something wrong, I could always just come home. So I always had that feeling. So I always took the road less traveled. When I turned 40, you get to that point and you're like, oh my God, I lived in New York City. I had a great job, I had great friends, I loved my life, but it was like a treadmill. I was doing the same thing over and over again. My friends, we were having the same conversation. We were going to the same places or doing the same thing. And I just had this epiphany that I want to do something else. I want to do something different. And I had some friends from church at Abyssinian in New York who moved to Dubai, and I went to visit them with another friend. And when I got to Dubai, I thought, I could do this. This is not as scary as everyone makes it seem. And when I came back, again, it may be a spiritual thing, but I felt that it was something I was supposed to do. And as soon as I started making plans, like I decided I was going to tell my boss what I wanted to do, and maybe Time Warner, at least I was at Time Warner, maybe Time Warner would, transfer me to a job over there. But every step that I took was a positive. It wasn't like, yes, let's do this, but I always got something positive from it. So I took that as a sign that this is what I'm supposed to do. So I just started making plans. I threw out a wide net and said, listen, I'm looking for a job in Dubai. I went on LinkedIn. It was early days LinkedIn. And I sought out women, single women who lived in Dubai. I'm like, I'm looking for anyone who can give me some, feedback. I looked for women who were lawyers like me, who did communications, through, Time Warner Network, anyone who could just give me some background so I wouldn't go in blind. And then I swear to you, I made the decision in January, and I got interviews in March, and then June, I got an offer in July, and I moved in September. That's how fast it went. So in my mind, that was meant to be.
So I'm a big fan of this book called Callings. Corinne knows that. I speak about it all the time. And the author talks about the call and response, right? So you get a message that I should do something, and then you can choose to respond or not. So it sounds like your response led to kind of a series of things. It was gathering information. It was contacting people you knew. It was just activated. And so you're there. And so we'd love to hear on behalf of our listeners about what worked and what didn't.
So before I left, here's as much as what you just said, as much as I knew there was the right thing to do, I had all these people around me saying, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? What are you doing? What are you doing? Oh my God, what are you doing?" My family was like, "What? What are you doing?" At work, they sort of teased me like, "Oh yeah, you're going to go there. It's crazy. It's scary. It's the Middle East. Why are you doing this?" And as much as I was like, I know what I'm doing, it's sort of like I'm a musical theater fan, but I felt like I was Barbara Streisand and Funny Girl. And it's like, stop, don't tell me, that type of thing. But I wanted to do it anyway. And then when I got there, I mean, my best friend cried in tears. It's so much so she couldn't go to the airport with me. Her husband took me. And I was still, full of energy, like, yes, I'm going to do this. And I get on the plane, I land, and I get there, and my new job had got me temporary housing. And I get there, and I'm like, oh my God, did I make the right decision, right? And it's so funny. I do Moth, in New York. They do storytelling. And I told this story, and it's a true story. When I got there, my second day there, my job got me a car. And I went to work, and on my way home from work, they told me, oh, it's really easy to get home. I drove an hour and a half outside of where I was supposed to go. I lived they put me in temporary housing 10 minutes away from where work is. And I was an hour and a half away from work because all the signs were in Arabic and I didn't know where I was going. And I didn't have Waze or any GPS or anything like that. And I would tell you again, and I'm going to go back to the spiritual piece. I pulled off the side of the road and I stopped and I was like, God, you didn't bring me this far to leave me. You got to get me home, right? And I just turned around and I just started making, I was making rights to go there. So I said, I'll make lefts to come back. And I finally made it home in like an hour and a half when it should have taken me 10 minutes. But again, this was something saying, you know what? Have faith, Heather, have faith, right? And it got better. And I went to work and, you always have this, are they going to find out that I'm not as smart as they think I am? But everything, again, clicked. It worked. I met Americans there who are still my friends, to this day. I've met friends, from all over the world at that job that are still my friends. And the work was something I could do, but I also learned from it. But I will tell you, the biggest thing that I learned initially was about culture. Here I was in this, I brought my preconceived notions about living in the Middle East. And some of it's true and some of it isn't. Some of the things that I liked initially is that women are honored, They give you the perception in terms of saying women can't do this, that, and the other. But we go first. There's separate, entrances. You get to get in line first. There are a lot of things that you're like, wow, this is great. In meetings, they listen to you, they were never disrespectful. But what I did also find that, and I guess we're kind of raised this way to be the only Black person there in a meeting and in a room. I was like usually one of the few Americans. So, but being one of the few Americans was sort of an honor because they were like, oh, you're a subject matter expert. So we're going to listen to you because you're bringing all this, Western knowledge. And that's very empowering. And it also, again, reinforced my faith that I'm supposed to be here. There's something for me to do here. And that's going to give me some meaning. So that was work. And then when you talk about community, most of the people, and I'm sure a lot of people will say this, when you move to the Middle East, even if you're moving with your family, you're kind of there alone. In New York, I had my family, I had my friends. So when holidays came around, I had someone to do that with. But when you're there by yourself, your friends have to become your family. And you have to trust those people and you have to, change how you look at things. When you're going to your family dinner, it's like, yeah, I'm going over my mother's and my cousins, and you just do what you do because they have to accept you because you're family. But when you have to have friends who you want to have some connection to have someone to listen to you, to, relax and decompress with, that's work. And that was, another challenge that had to be done.
No, I think that's great, though. It's very interesting to understand just like what the day-to-day was like. And it's not like you could, this is thousands of miles away. You can't pick up and come home whenever you like. So then you have to make a life for yourself. How would you perceive as a Black woman in Dubai? How would you think as a Black American woman in Dubai? What did you think the perception was, and what was the reality of the perception?
Well, the interesting thing is that Obama had just become president. So they were all on this wave of, isn't it great? Black people are great, and he's president, and they were all congratulating me. We love Obama, blah, 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 blah. So that was kind of great. Again, we're used to being like the only one. So of course I was the only a Black American woman in my entire company, and it was a small company. It was like 500 people. Not the only American. I think that most of my non-American friends were curious. A lot of them didn't know, and Americans they definitely did not know Black Americans, Black women Americans. So it was more of a, they were interested and inquisitive about, what my life was about, and they would ask questions, and they were never, offensive questions. It was really kind of like, I want to know, and at the time I had my hair, I think, in braids, and they were like, we just want to know, why do you do this? those types of things. And I'm going to jump a little bit further. I taught in a college at Zayed University, and then I taught Emirati girls, so local girls. And Emiratis come in all hues. They come in very fair, they come very brown, all hues. And I was their teacher in this college. And most of these girls had never probably met an American Black woman, let alone have them as their teacher and to be able to have a conversation, right? They called me Oprah because that was the only African-American woman that they even knew anything about. And I taught communications. It was interpersonal communication. And most of my class was, the instructional piece, but then probably a half an hour after class, it was really talking about being and loving being a brown woman, because a lot of them were like always in these, magazines that were really celebrating white Western women. And here are all these girls who had curves, who had curly hair, who had, brown skin, and they were wanting to be what was in these magazines. And I was like, you have to love yourself. And I told them, I said, when you don't love yourself, we had these great conversations. When you don't love yourself, you're offending me, your mother, your grandmother, your aunts, who all look like me, and you. Love yourself. We had so many great conversations. And I thought, oh my God, this is why I'm supposed to be here, right? But I love that interaction, and that here I am on the other side of the world, and I'm helping them celebrate themselves. And that's not why I came to that school, and that's what I didn't plan to do. That's what was happening. And then I would run into the girls in the mall, and they would be covered. Some of them would cover their face, and they'd run up to me, and they're like, Michelle. And that I can't even tell you how rewarding it felt to be a woman of color, to not help the whole class, but individuals say, you know what, I like me. And that was like amazing.
So what a beautiful thing to connect really just across humanity, being able to touch the hearts and minds of young people, and to connect that which in some ways in this country is othered, right? Sort of your skin color, right, makes you other. And you were able to connect that with beauty, even across the seas, right? That's an amazing gift. And it makes me really just curious about what capacity may be brewing within the souls of Black and brown women that may be equipping for this kind of experience. So I just jotted down that so one is the connection across appearance. One is that you identified friends as family. One other one is that you almost got to redefine what is Black, right? Like you were first an American there. And so people could ask you questions with curiosity, and you were sort of unencumbered. And same question in this country might be viewed as like a microaggression, right? There, it's curiosity about, what's it like to be you, right? So I'm just curious whether or not you think there are some Black girl magic kinds of things that you think are preparing and equipping for that kind of experience.
again, I think you have to be a little confident. You have to. I remember telling one of my friends in Dubai. It was an American white woman friend of mine, and she was complaining about something that was really, I thought so light and fluffy. And in my head, I may have, I know I did. I spoke out loud, not thinking that I said it out loud, but I was like, I don't have time to be fragile. I didn't. I couldn't go there. I am here by myself. I am trying to do something. I'm either trying to prepare and save money for whatever is coming next. I'm trying to get as much out of this experience as I can. And I don't have time to whine and cry, and no one's going to respond to me if I go in their office and sit there and cry. I have something I have to do. My family is, without me because I want to have this adventure. So I think that, I guess there has to be some confidence going and faith. And I also think you have to let a lot of things go, because for me, there were a lot of things that I was like, that doesn't make sense. And I had to let go of that. Everything that happens in the U.S. is right, and everything that happens everywhere, anywhere else is wrong. I also, and I stayed connected. Corinne had me starting writing blogs initially when I left. So that was great for me because I could at least write down my feelings. There were other women of color from Time Warner that I will never forget who held me up when I needed to, Skype and say, I can't do this, or help me walk me through this. And then I would tell you, in Dubai, we found each other. There was, listen, getting your hair done as an African-American woman or a Black woman in Middle East, where the hair comes in different curls. We found each other, and there was a woman from New York who opened up her hair salon, and she would have parties where we would all come together so we could meet each other from all over the area, not just Dubai, but Abu Dhabi and Alain. A lot of them were teachers, but these are women that I still have as friends because we came together. Most of us, were new or had just gotten there, and we held each other up, even if it was just at the hair salon, and she would do it once a month. So to answer your question directly, you have to have some confidence, but then you also have to let go and find people and tell people, I need help. I need you to just listen to me, or just to let me talk, or tell me what do you think I should do, or finding those people who are there already, who are, can hold you up. And that comes from, you can find them with your sorority, and for men with fraternities. I did internations and a Small World, which are international groups where they would like meet up groups so I could meet people. And then I heavily relied on my friends back in New York through Facebook. Corinne is one. I tried to stay connected as possible, just talking with people and showing people what's going on, because I needed that, because I was never sure that I was going to be able to get that there, especially in those first couple of years. So I needed them to be my foundation to say, you're still doing the right thing. We love what you're doing. Keep going. And that, they don't know that, most of them, but that was a lot of, power behind me that kept me standing up and saying, I can do this. I'm going to show them. I want to be a trailblazer. I want to, 10 years from now, to be able to be on a podcast saying to other women, do this.
Indeed. And we were over here going, wow, we're so proud of Heather. And I wish I had the guts to do that.
Remember, I would come back and I would get everybody together. I'm like,
yes.
Because I needed that energy. I was like, oh my God, I need my girlfriends.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the job that you had, because assume some amazing positions while you were there. So how did that come about?
The first job I got, like I said, I cast a wide net and people were like, oh, well, I've heard of this. I asked everybody. I was like, listen, tell me what's going on. And that's how I got the first job. And then when I got there in September, the market crashed a few months later. So then my job kind of changed from communications to kind of crisis management. And that was something I wasn't used to at all. But the market had changed and they were starting to lay off people. So honestly, I was there for like a little less than a year. And then I got laid off myself because the market was dead. And I had to make the choice. And again, here comes I don't have time to be fragile. I have to really think about it. But I got laid off and I had the choice. I could pack up my stuff and move back to the States. But then I thought, honestly, if I really want to be honest, I would be a small fish in a big pond. But if I stayed in the Middle East, I'm a big fish in a small pond because they didn't have a lot of expats there. Definitely not that were educated that I thought to my level or experience. So I thought, ooh, I'm a big fish in a little pond. So, but they were going through a crisis as well. So there weren't a lot of jobs, honestly. And that's when I went into teaching because I said, well, I have to stay here. So what can I do? And I'm telling you, I threw it out there and someone said, oh, well, they're looking for adjunct professors at the university. Teach. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll teach. And I started teaching. And then that became like a wonderful experience. And then they wanted to hire me as a full-time teacher, but I didn't think that was my calling. And I needed to work. And I swear to you, out of the blue, someone called me and said, Barclays is looking for, someone for Barclays Africa to cover communications for Barclays Africa. I had been to Africa twice. Like, what? You want me to be the head of communications? And I've been to Africa twice, once to Egypt and one to South Africa. Are you kidding me? But anyway, but I interviewed with them. And again, it was about my education and my experience. And honestly, because I was a woman. And there was Barclays Africa at the time was really on a path of hiring women because banking was mostly men and definitely in the Middle East. So they hired me. And let me tell you, that was one of my best jobs. My supervisor there, my boss there, and I are still friends, love him to death. The guy who worked with me is like a brother. I love them. But I learned Africa. I was traveling all around Africa and I learned Africa. And then, of course, as luck would have it, they decided to move Barclays Africa, which was based in Dubai, to Africa. And love Africa, love Joburg, don't want to live there. And so I chose to take a package and leave instead of moving with them. And in between the time of taking the package and leaving, I met a woman who was a friend of a friend. And I told her, I said, I have to find a new job. And she was in the elevator and she met one of her new neighbors and who was working for Hilton who said, oh yeah, we're looking for someone to do communications. And she told me, and I got that job within a month. Again, I was like, I don't have any hospitality experience. I don't know. And this was over the Middle East and Africa. Only part of the Middle East I had been to was UAE and Jordan, maybe Lebanon or something. But I'm like, or Istanbul. But I'm like, they hired me. And it was one of the best jobs I ever had. I mean, all of them were really great jobs, but working for Hilton was great. I got to learn the Middle East, and I already knew Africa from Barclays Africa. So it all worked out really well. And I got to do things that I don't think I would have ever been able to do in the States. I mean, I worked in banking. I could barely balance my checkbook. And I was in charge of communication for bank. But I learned so many different things. And then I got to do a lot of different things. And that, I think the opportunities there are beyond imagination.
So I love that some of your reflections were maybe assumptions about what qualifications, what knowledge base you needed in order to step into some of these roles. And in fact, you had exactly what you needed or exactly what they were looking for. So I think that's a great kind of point to amplify for our listeners. And so I'm curious about, we started out with a reflection about study abroad and those young people who were in, by the time of this airing, we're in commencement season. There are many young folks just launching, and some will find the availability for employment very challenging. And so I'm curious about what you might say for more junior folks who may not have as much heft to stand on. Is there any counsel that you might give them about getting started if they feel called to this kind of journey?
I think from what I just told you, a lot of it has to do with that inner voice, that tells you, you can't do this job. Why would you do this job? They're not going to hire you. Why you? And to not listen to that, and if it seems right, do it. I also believe for younger people that, especially millennials, right, that you can't be the boss right away. throughout my life, I've taken lots of jobs that were giving me something that I could learn for my next job. My mother always said, dress for your next job, you know? It's so funny. I'm so old fashioned, right? People come to work in jeans and stuff. I'm like, no, I'm dressing for that next job, which is going to be the promotion. And I don't understand why you're not doing that. And it's the same thing of taking jobs off of your lane to gain experience in something else. So people are coming out of college with a degree in communications. If you can find a job in, I don't know, doing, some hospitality stuff, I would do that. I tell, especially since I'm coming from Hilton too, I tell young people all the time to go into hospitality, even if it's front desk or whatever you want, whatever the entry level thing is. And these hotels, if you're interested, will have you traveling all around the world every 3 years. And you can learn the hotel business, but you also learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about people. I really pushed going into hospitality, but I also pushed, taking the road less traveled. I never did this before. Let me try this. You never know. It might work. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. But you also have to have a board of directors. You have to have those people that you can call or talk to who will give you great advice about X and Y. Like I have best friends, and some of them, are good for some things. We all do, and some are not good for others. There's some you can have a real financial conversation with. Some you can have your romantic, like, what did he do? Those types of conversations. And there are those who will tell you the truth. I have one of my friends who says, think of all these bad things that happen and what's the common denominator? You. So you have to change. You have to have those people who can tell you the truth. And so I try to surround myself with a board of directors, and I kind of go to those people. And I think that young people need to start figuring out who those people are. The other thing too that I do, and it's very hard to do, I try to keep in touch with everybody. Even if it's just saying, happy birthday, I'm glad just thinking about you, or this made me think about you. And not going to people when you need them, but talking to people when you don't need them. Just saying, you know what, I just thought about you. That has helped me immensely. I go to people at work now, and I was like, hi, I just wanted to say good morning. And they're like, oh, okay. Now they may think I'm crazy, but it's because I'm like, I see you. It's sort of like namaste. I see you, and I want you to see me. But if you don't see me, that's okay. But I'm going to say, I see you. And that sometimes doesn't resonate with people, but you'd be so surprised at the people that it does resonate. And I have been helped by those people when I least expected it, because they're like, oh, even though I haven't seen you in 12 years, we've kept in touch. And sure, I'll make a recommendation for you, or sure, I'll introduce you to this person, or sure, I'll talk to you about this. And that's something that young people need to start early. I remember my dad told me to start saving early. It's a hard thing to do. And also staying in touch with people is a hard thing to do. But I think it has great return.
That's amazing. I agree that staying in touch with people is a really, really important thing, because, as you said, you don't want to wait until you need something to call someone. And the sense of urgency that you have when you need something is great. And if you can take that pressure off yourself and just connect with people, it's so much better.
Can I interrupt you for a second? The other thing I wanted to say was, going back to your question, is about when you're thinking about going overseas, what I did too is not all countries are the same. So you have to find a country that aligns with you and your values per se. Because if you go to a place that doesn't, it's not going to be good. I can name a number of places. Like I chose not to go to Joburg because I could not. People can do it. I could not do it. And you have to find those places that align with your lifestyle and your values.
I wanted to talk to you. You mentioned, so spirituality and your faith has been a through line through this experience. So how has your faith deepened, shifted? How has your spirituality changed through this experience?
I think it changed, and this is so terrible, right? In my 40s, right? It changed because you remember Roy Johnson, who worked for him. Roy told me once, pray expectant and don't chase money. So my board of directors included men too, right? And I remember thinking, what's he talking? Right? Praying expectantly. That means, praying and knowing it's going to happen. And so in my 40s, that's when it started. I would pray for something or ask for something, and things would happen because I was sort of going back to what you were saying earlier, I was working at it. So I was constantly working at it. And so things started happening. You're like, oh my God. And it also goes back to what you were talking about earlier about quality of life overseas. Quality of life and what, how far your dollar can go and what you can, the lifestyle you can have, to be able to have that was like, wow, life doesn't have to be me living in New York in, 600 square foot apartment and doing the same thing, that there's so many other things to do and see. I learned that instead of chasing money to chase the opportunity that was based on faith, again, worked for me. And I never chase money. I still don't chase money. And even though I could take something, and this is a good thing for younger people, even though the job may not pay me what I wanted initially, if it's something that I really want to do, after a while, I end up making the money that I need to make or want to make. But I'd rather go to work and do a job that I like doing than going to a job that I don't like, but just is paying me money. That's just me. Other people can do it. I can't. I cannot look people in the face and do a job if I don't really believe in what I'm doing. So overseas, I think that I found that. And it's so funny because when I thought about doing a book about my 8 years there, it was going to be named Lost and Found in the Desert, because I felt like I left New York and my life in the US because I wanted something new, and I found it. And part of that discovery was, my faith, my belief in myself, that I thought I was beautiful and worthy and valuable, that I could contribute, and that I just found so many different things. I mean, just traveling the world and seeing things and doing things on my own that I never thought I would do. When I was in New York, I never went to the movies by myself. I went on vacation by myself, and going to, it was a freedom that I learned, and that came from my spirituality that I brought back here. I started meditating and doing yoga a lot and trying to eat healthier and just trying to do things that I just didn't even think about doing. And that's freedom, isn't it? Isn't that freeing?
Yeah, I was thinking, so there's the forced function of having to sort of figure it out, right? And having to make a way. And then there's actually the freeing function that is, I get to be somebody totally new. I wonder if you thought about, let's say, what's my persona? What's my Dubai persona, right? How might I step into that more fully? You could sort of be a whole different person, and guess what? No one would know. So it's an interesting.
There were yangs to that too. I mean,
yeah.
there were dark sides to it too. The dark side is that in Dubai was a very young city. So here I am, a 40-year-old woman who in the Muslim country is pretty much grandmother. They get married fairly early in their 20s. And here I am 40, not married, no children. And that was kind of a side eye, like, what's wrong with really to them. And so the city, even for the expats, the city was very young. So just, without going into detail, social life was very difficult, because again, in the Western world, beauty has, certain identities to what is beautiful: long hair, white, thin, whatever, young, all these different things that weren't me, and so that was pretty challenging to date, because the competition were these young women who, in my 20s, you're kind of like free and fancy free. And here I am I want to have a discussion. And they're like, what? I just want to have sex, And so, it was a totally different, challenge to do that, So socially, I found it very difficult. Most of my African-American or Black girlfriends were either already married when they got to Dubai or married European men. So most of them were married. Very few. And it's so funny. The other thing I would tell people is that when I was in New York, most of my girlfriends, I would say 85% of my girlfriends were single and 15% were married. And that flipped when I went to Dubai. 15% of my friends, if not less, probably 10% of my friends were single. And then 90% were in a couple or married, something. So I stood out even more. So I was always either, that third person, or it was a challenge. It was definitely a challenge. So, and then Black men, African American men, were not interested in African American women, those that were single there. African men, sometimes, but usually they wanted white women. So I had to change what I was interested in, what I found attractive, because I had a totally different thing. So that was something that was hard too. And then the other challenge, I wouldn't say challenge, the other disappointment or low was racism, right? So the only racist thing that were ever said to me in the 8 years I was overseas came out of the mouths of white Americans. No one else. No British people, no Europeans, no Asians, no Africans, no Middle Easterns. Always white Americans, not Canadians, white Americans. It was a constant, like, I mean, that was very disappointing, because it's like, wow, So those were kind of, I guess, the biggest lows, and kind of realization of, even though I was talking to the girls and we were trying to redefine beauty, and I want them to feel beautiful, and as I felt beautiful, it wasn't enough to have the social life that I would have liked. And then the constant reminder that even outside of the U.S., I was still going to be subject to the racism of the U.S.
Got to ask one more thing, though. So you made the decision to come back. What was the adjustment like when you got back to the States?
It is still an adjustment. It is definitely an adjustment. I mean, it's a good adjustment, because I now can see my family more often, and that's great, because my parents are getting older and I want to be a part of their lives. But I chose not to live in the same state as them, because I needed the warmth. And I will tell you, and I don't know if it's about Miami, because I live in Miami, but it was like someone threw ice cold water in my face. Because I was so used to my friends being my family when I'm not around my family. And people are not like that here. People have their family, and so they go off. So I'm spending holidays alone, or initially when I got here, I had to spend them alone. And that was kind of scary. Well, just not scary, it's just kind of lonely, But what I did to combat that, I pulled up and started making my own community. I went to a meditation community, and I join these different things, and I find people that sync with me. And I'm like, okay, if you don't have anywhere to go, I'm going to cook dinner for Thanksgiving. I'm going to cook, you come to my house, and we'll create this community here, because I have to have a community. And if you need to have a community, you come on over and you can be in my community. That was one. And then the second, and maybe it's just, and it's so disheartening for me, to say this again, but it's just the subtle racism. It's just so unfortunate. And I'm not saying it's not. There is no racism outside the U.S., but it's exhausting. But that said, I made the right decision, and I have no regrets.
So what a full experience you've described. What was the title again? Lost and Found in the Desert?
Yeah.
So get to writing. I hope that you will. We are just about out of time for this episode. So I'd love to close with, what are you taking with you from that experience into this next phase of your journey?
I have a new guy in my office who's newly married, and we were talking yesterday, and I was telling him about some of my travels, and he was talking about going on his honeymoon with his wife and how they were going to buy this, that, and the other, or his wife wants to buy this, that, and the other. And I told him, I said, I've had so many opportunities to buy different things when I was traveling. I said, but the one thing that I value the most are the experiences. Those I'll have forever. I could lose a ring, or, a carpet could fall apart, but I'll have these stories and these travels all my life. And then the other thing I think that I take with me is that I'm not alone. I'm not alone. I had so many people who were behind me who held me up. And it's my responsibility to hold up others. So I try my best to get more people to travel, to see the world, know that there's something outside of here, and just to be happy in being you. And also, I think the other thing that I've taken, again, when I mentioned to you earlier about going over there and taking my thoughts of American being the best and everything else is work, I think that everyone should leave the US for a little bit and see how it is on the outside looking in. Because I think that when you hear people talk about X and Y, and you actually experience it or meet people, I'm not meeting people who are like New Zealand descendants, but I have friends who are born and raised in New Zealand. When you have those experiences, then you can make your own judgment, or make no judgment at all, or realize that the judgments you are making are not right. And that's something that is not tangible, but it definitely, makes me who I am. And I'm happy. I'm good with that.
We are really, really appreciative of you joining us, Heather. I remember you prepping to go on this journey and hearing like stories along the way. And it's wonderful to get the perspective of the experience, in totality, and what it's, all the gifts that it's given you. For our listeners, if you have this kind of desire to live and work abroad, I urge you to think about Heather's journey and see if you can find a place that you can call home abroad.
That's our show for today. Look for the latest installment of the Visible Women podcast every other Wednesday, where we tackle issues and experiences that relate to appearance, diversity, and inclusion, and that are relevant to our lives. Check out our website, visiblewomenpodcast.com, where you can follow us on all of our social channels. And make sure you join our Facebook group for a follow-up discussion on today's topic. Until then, here's to all the visible women out there. Never forget that we see you.